All right. Welcome again, everyone, for joining us today. This is our first session, I guess, for the first season, for the second season of this professional development series. My name is Dr. Tina Wu, and I am representing Manners today, or Minorities in Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Related Sciences. And I'm very excited to welcome also my co-hosts. We have Dr. Lutrina Staley from the National Association of Conservation Districts, as well as Ms. Renee Bolden from Soil and Water Conservation Society. So this virtual workshop series is a collaboration between the three of our organizations who have a dedicated interest in supporting the development of diverse students and early career professionals in conservation, natural resources, and related sciences fields. So regardless of your background, race or ethnicity, ability or identity, our goal really with this series is to provide practical solutions and strategies for you to help achieve your professional and personal goals and connect you with leaders who are here to support your growth. So welcome again, and we're so glad that you're here. Just some housekeeping things before we get started. This meeting is being recorded and it will be uploaded to our respective websites. Renee can drop those in the chat, but those in attendance will also receive a certificate in our post-session email. So keep an eye out for that. And again, please feel free to engage with our speakers today through reactions or comments in the chat. And we will have some time at the end for questions with our speakers today. So let's get started. So unfortunately, Cynthia Stokely was not able to join our chat today, but we do have two really fantastic leaders who are excited to share their insights about managing your time effectively. So I'm very excited to introduce our first speaker, Ms. Elizabeth Galbreath. So Elizabeth is a Merck Animal Health Senior Specialist of Future Talent Programs based in Lenexa, Kansas. Lenexa, Kansas. And she manages the business's entry-level talent programs and partnerships, including National FFA, AFA, and Manners. And she grew up on a dairy farm in Northern Maryland and received her Bachelor of Science in Ag Leadership and Community Education in 2017 of May from Virginia Tech, with an emphasis in applied economic management. Since she's graduated from college, she has worked in youth programs, marketing, sales, agricultural education, and leader development. She has spoken to various audiences ranging from national and state 4-H and FFA programs to a TEDx Virginia Tech collaboration. Elizabeth is committed to being a reliable, authentic spokeswoman for the ag community and developing young people to reach their full potential. So welcome, Elizabeth. We also have a second speaker, Ms. Ashley Collins, who serves as the Chief Executive Officer of the North Carolina Peanut Growers Association. And the association represents over 650 peanut growers in the third largest peanut producing state in our nation, North Carolina. She serves on various boards, including the North Carolina Ag Foundation Board and North Carolina FFA Foundation Board. Before joining the North Carolina Peanut Growers, Ashley's career focused on young professionals pursuing careers in the ag industry. She graduated from NC State University with a Bachelor of Science in Ag Education and a Master of Science in Ag Education from North Carolina A&T University. Throughout her career, she has managed over 75 interns and collegiate young professionals through ambassador programs for agcareers.com, as well as Ag Futures of America. So welcome again, Elizabeth and Ms. Ashley.
Thanks, Tina.
Yeah.
So we're going to start off with our first question of the night. What are the key challenges that you've observed when it comes to time management for early career professionals and senior level students in our industry? And I'll turn that over to Elizabeth first.
Wow. Putting me on the spot first, Tina. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, when you have a bio like that, Elizabeth, I mean, you've got to go first.
I don't think that's true, but I appreciate it. And crew, we're going to have a good time this evening. Ashley and I know each other pretty well. So we'll be informal with you and invite you into the conversation. Thank you, Tina, and for queuing us up. So when I would say that there's certainly trends when it comes to managing our time. when it comes to this age demographic that you had shared, your early career and senior level students. Now, I just want to start by saying I would define time management. I think that's a loosely defined term, and maybe just to clarify what that means in different words, I would say time management comes down to how you make decisions and the way that you are spending your life, not just your time. So it's much broader than just yeses and nos, but it's really how are you prioritizing the things in your life? So I would say there are two trends that I see, and Ashley, tell me and feel free to add in as well. But I would say students or early career professionals are either doing too much or they're too focused on themselves. So let me break down a little bit of what each of those look like. So if someone is doing too much, I was a person in college that I did way too many organizations than what I could keep up with, had too many leadership positions because I was very easily excited by those things and wanted to do those things. And I think a lot of us are interested in getting involved in things because we're genuinely curious and we're passionate about a lot of things, right? And I would say really the most important piece of this is for you to define your focus and you to recognize that life has some seasonality to it. And so maybe, you know, at your first and second year of college, you're able to do more things, but you don't do them as intentionally or as deeply. But as you get older and get more experience, it's really wise for you to focus on one or two things and go deeper in them. And that's not just for you to, you know, personally to manage your time better, but it's also for your impact to go deeper in those organizations or the things that you do, right? So my advice, if you find yourself in a camp of you're doing too many things and you're saying yes and you don't necessarily know how to say no, which, hey, relatable, I'm not an expert in that. I will say find one or two things and do them well and commit to them fully and find a balance of what you can give to others and what fills you up. So for example, what I like to do is I am based out of the Kansas City area. You were right, Tina, when you said Kansas City, Lenexa / Kansas City, all the above. So basically, I like to have an organization that helps me grow and develop. That isn't a big part of my life and one that I can volunteer and give back to. So maybe that's way that you break it down, just depending on the season of life that you're in. Maybe you can only do one of those things, but don't be afraid to do those, to find a balance of those two. And then the second piece of really focusing on yourself and your self-development. I don't mean to say or call anyone selfish, but I think as we get into the early parts of our careers, we focus on how do we do our job well? How do we build our personal brand really well? And sometimes you can go really, really, really heavily into working very hard. And maybe you are not thinking about the healthy habits or the boundaries that you can set when it comes to managing your time and taking care of yourself. I'm a person that in my first job, I mean, I grew up on a dairy farm and I was very proud of the fact that I worked really hard. And that translated into my first job. And I found myself being one of the only people that worked pretty late at the office, although I did have a lot of work to do. There was definitely something in my, just kind of inherently in me that was like, okay, if I want to be good, I have to work long hours, right? Maybe not necessarily be smart with those hours. And we'll talk more about what that looks like later. But I just think that a lot of the time as we start our career, we're like, okay, well, how do I get people to know me and have a good positive brand? And that can be really easy in your early career. So my encouragement or my advice, if you find yourself in that case, is also give yourself some ability to find community. Maybe it's in one of those organizations that we talked about. Maybe it's, you know, for you, maybe you went out of state to school, or maybe you didn't go to school, whatever you find yourself in. I think after college, it can be a really hard transition to go from community is all around us to what does that community look like? So it's easy to kind of throw yourself into your work and say, my identity is in what people know me in the working world. So I'd encourage you to find groups or apply to organizations that allow you to grow a community of people who are like-minded to you, or maybe share some identity with you, whether it's age or maybe it's religious affiliation, or maybe it's just you live in the same area, so that you can talk to people about what you're going through. So you don't just get focused on yourself and get wrapped up in that, because you can easily go down a deep, dark tunnel of just focusing on your career. And in reality, work is much more, or excuse me, who you are is a lot a lot more than just your productivity or your work or your job title. So it's important to build that community around you. So again, that's a long-winded saying. Some folks do too much, and some folks are going too hard into focusing on themselves and their career. Ashley, what would you add to that?
Well, I think those are all great points. I agree with everything that Elizabeth just said. I want to touch on two things, one that she said and one that she didn't mention. I absolutely agree with it is a new trend. So I'll be very transparent and tell you all that I am 40. So if you're trying to get a gauge of where I am in the professional world, I have I mean, I started working as soon as I came out of my undergrad, so I'm at somewhere between I'm 2005. So I've been in the working world since then. So that just kind of gives you a level of where I'm at. And I had to answer on the drop down, it was the 10 plus on the registration for today, for my experience level. So the trend that is new that I am seeing is absolutely the doing too much, more so than I have ever seen in interns and college students. So I have had an intern. I've been at the peanut growers for 2 summers now. I've almost 3 years here, and I brought an internship program here. We had not historically had interns. Both the interns that I've had working for me the past 2 summers have been involved in so much stuff, and I have looked at their resumes and had that moment of, have I become the old lady and I just think that this is a lot? But then once they get on board, and not just the two that I hired, but like other candidates, through the interview process and also through the just working with them and talking to them and whatnot, that's the new trend. Just doing too much, trying to be too diverse, and some of that I think is coming from COVID and having a little bit of a need or a feeling like we may miss, like tomorrow these opportunities could be taken away. The world could shut down again, and so we need to make sure we're in everything and doing everything and being at everything that we can possibly be at. But you're going to burn yourself out, and you're not going. I know Elizabeth said, or you're going too hard at things. You're not giving yourself the time in that time management, which is why you're all here today, to go deep enough into something so that you can become what I call a MacGyver. And there's probably very few people on this call who know who MacGyver is. But that's the kind of people that we want to hire in the working world, are the MacGyvers, the people who know how to be very cross-disciplinary in the workplace. And you learn that because you're able to give so much focus to something. So that's the trend. The one thing that I want to talk about, just to maybe give some levity to this for a second. Anytime I'm asked to talk about time management, I bring this up because I have, as in my bio, they mentioned 70 some college students that I've worked with over my career. First week with any college student, especially an intern, so not so much the ambassadors, but interns, they will yawn all day, every day. I actually think I maybe told that to Elizabeth when we worked together and did some training. And I'll give you like your first week, right, to yawn. And it's a time management. I mean, you're shifting from a schedule that where you went to class for 45 minutes to maybe 90 minutes at the most, and then you got to get up and walk around, and you walked maybe to your next class and you got your blood flowing or whatnot. But then you come into a corporate environment, and I'm using this example because my entire career has been at a computer, like in a corporate environment like that. There's a lot of jobs in ag that are out in the field doing, but even, like some of those I've heard some stories of, in the car, same kind of similar thing. So you've always going to have that downtime, but it's that shifting your body from the college schedule to the workplace schedule. And it's all about managing your time, going to bed earlier, getting up earlier, getting your juices flowing or whatnot. And so I've had an intern in the past who just had a really, really hard time all summer shaking it. And we had to have multiple conversations about it throughout the summer of like, okay, what do we need to do to because you are constantly yawning. So like what's happening? Are you not going to bed early enough? And then so I say that to say that I'm bringing some levity to it, but it's very serious. I mean, you've got to learn to shift your schedule, whether that's for an internship or if it's your first, your first big, big person job, big girl, big boy job, making that transition into the workplace, making sure that you are getting adequate sleep, caffeine, whatever it takes that is legal to get yourself awake, focused on the day.
And I would say to that point, though, what's important is that, in college, self-care might not feel like the highest priority to you all. And whether that's taking walks or, Ashley's like going to bed early, drinking enough water, that stuff might sound silly. But again, that's a decision in your life that you have to choose to do. Therefore, it needs to be incorporated into your schedule. And I'm not saying put on your calendar, drink a bottle of water. That's not what I'm saying. But there is an element to which you just have to remember that there's some recognition that you have to realize that when you make transitions in your life, self-care needs to be important, and that's part of time management.
Thank you, Ashley and Elizabeth. Those are a lot of great tips already. Just from the first question, asking about the key challenges that we're seeing about time management. So I think when we talk about time management, there's also that comes in play is setting goals. And we all know that setting clear goals is really essential to managing your time. So how can early career professionals and students achieve or set achievable goals and track their progress effectively? And let's start with Ashley.
I was going to say, she's the goal queen. She needs to go first.
So I used to, Elizabeth knows me. She called me the goal queen because I'm real big on SMART goals. And Elizabeth and I haven't chatted recently, but I just got into a program about creating boundaries and I had to create SMART goals for myself. And I was like, I got this. But so SMART goals are, if you don't know what those are, there's a lot of trainings out there, but it's an acronym that you can use to help yourself create goals that are going to be achievable. They're going to have something. They're going to have like a time to them. All the different letters stand for something. And I think one of the biggest things about, to answer this question very briefly, because we took so much time on the first question, I'm just going to say you've got to have some type of visual for yourself, which is something that when Elizabeth and I were working together, we did, is we created like a gauge. And I met a young professional the other day who is in the real estate world, and she's created herself in her office this massive board because she's trying to sell so many houses within like a certain amount of time, and she's drawn like little monopoly houses and she's checking them off, and it looks kind of cartoonish, but it's how she's tracking for herself where she's sitting in her goal. And I was like, that is exactly what you got to do. Whatever you need to do to like color in the chart, if it's, whether you figure out some way to build that in Excel, which is what I figured out how to do. You can actually do it in Google Sheets. There's a really cool little gauge in Google Sheets, if you didn't know that, that you can use to create a little ticker for yourself if you're that kind of person. Or you can, if it's just coloring on, a sheet of paper on your wall, if it's, and that can be for something fun or something professional. But I think that's the visual is what you need.
Yeah. So thinking about, I'm going to backtrack for a second. So I think that's a really great way to track it. When I think about goals for early career professionals, sometimes it can be our main focus just to get the job. And then we think, okay, well, where do I go from here? How do I kind of, where's my compass, right? And one of the best pieces of advice that I've ever received is not just think about, the job that you want next, or just in general, think about the impact that you want to have on the world. And if you can conceptualize that in the terms of a job or the things that you would do or who you would work with, think about what skills or experiences would help you get there. So when it comes to setting those goals, think about well, for me, I have a big interest in presentations and public speaking. So for me, let's say that I picture myself on a stage at whatever agriculture, natural resources event. That means that I need to work on my public speaking skills, my negotiation skills. If I want to be paid for it, I need to work on how I present myself, right? So I have to think about what podcasts, what books, what conferences, et cetera, can help me with that, and what jobs align with that and help me learn those skills by working with other speakers or give me the ability to pursue that stuff outside of my day-to-day work. So I would say that's kind of how I would recommend people set goals. And then, as Ashley said, make it visual, track them. Honestly, tell a friend or a mentor about them to keep you accountable. And if you aren't quite sure how to break it down to make it more, achievable and actually reachable, then, talk to somebody about it, set some deadlines for yourself. I saw somebody put that in the chat, something about deadlines. Set deadlines. I'm a procrastinator. So when I put things and schedule things in my calendar, I am, number one, I have to stay accountable to myself. No one else is going to hold me accountable to it. But I always set it at least a couple of days, if not 1 or 2 weeks ahead of the date in which it needs to happen, because I know that if I think about it the day before it's due or multiple days before it's due, actually, I have better chances of getting it finished, because I like to marinate on some thoughts and make sure things are thorough. So I would say schedule the time, stick to it, set deadlines, maybe in advance of the legit deadlines if there is one, but make sure that you're sharing it with people, because it's where accountability happens.
Thank you both. You had mentioned earlier that students and just early career professionals are doing too much in today's world. And so what are your suggestions for how individuals can effectively prioritize their tasks to ensure that they are focusing on the most important activities that do contribute to, their professional goals and growth? So let's start with Elizabeth.
Sure. I feel super passionate about this, and you can tell that I'm an education major based on the way that I'll probably answer a few of these questions. Now, I would say before you can start to work towards prioritizing correctly and ways that work in your life, you have to have a compass inside of you to figure out what's most important to you. So that is a fancy way of saying you need to determine your values, and you need to set goals that relate to both that professional career that you're looking for and or the life that you want to build. I think I've heard this a lot in the last year. A lot of the times we ask ourselves, what do you want to do? We don't ask ourselves, who do you want to be? And you should be using that question continuously to frame the decisions that you make in everyday life. So maybe that's a parent. Maybe that's a good significant other. Maybe that's a mentor to someone. Maybe that's you just being a great coworker, whatever it might be. I would say decide what's most important to you and set goals related to the places that will help you develop. So ways that you can do that are seeking feedback or utilizing resources that help you become more aware with what is important to you and the ways that kind of help you, or what your operating system, for lack of a better word. So a couple of different assessments I think can be really helpful for you. 16 personalities is basically the Myers-Briggs assessment online, and it's free. So 16, the number 16 personalities.com is free. It's a really good starter for you just to kind of understand, who am I in a working world? What are the ways that I operate? And that can help you have a baseline of, what do I need to seek feedback on? What areas in which do I need to set goals? I'm a big fan of the Strengths Finder as well. You do have to pay for that one. Some schools and employers do offer that, but I think it's really helpful as well. And then I'm also a big fan of the Enneagram, which is less of an assessment and more of a tool just to find more about yourself and your motivation for things. So get a little bit of understanding on yourself with some self-reflection first. Know how you operate, what's most important to you, and then again, set goals related to who you want to be. What are the daily choices that will help me get there? Stay accountable. Like Ashley said, use visual cues for your goals. Write them down. I once heard, when it comes to sticking to your goals and prioritizing, I heard this, it was a very simple statement. I'm a big fan of simple things that kind of stick with you. Someone said in a webinar that I was attending that I usually make decisions based on what is good for either my heart, my resume, or my wallet. And if it's not good for any of those things, I don't do it. But if it's good for 2 or 3 of those things, then I pursue it. I just thought that was a cool way of just looking at maybe that's a filter that you use in your everyday life. Again, also recognizing who do I want to be? What are the choices that will help me get there? And then lastly, I would say in general, a great way to understand what is urgent and most important, and I'm sure Ashley will talk a little bit about this too. And Renee, please send this in the chat, is the Eisenhower matrix, which aids you in simple decision making for everyday tasks. And it's one axis is urgency and one axis it is importance. So you basically need to decide what's urgent and what's important in your life. And that blog post gives you a really good overview that I'd recommend that you look at and read through in time after this webinar of just understanding, okay, what task can I delegate or what task can I put off? What can I prioritize or deprioritize? So with that, I'll turn it over to Ashley.
I would say, again, I agree with Elizabeth. I'll add to everything that she said. Find multiple mentors and have conversations with them. So to this question being around, in this day and age of prioritizing tasks and focusing on what is the most important, once you have answered that question, or you think you're on a path for who do you want to be, find people who are like that. And they may not be in the companies that you're working for, right? They may be in affiliated organizations. They may be in a church or community group or so, like they're not, don't be so, pigeonholed into, sometimes we tend to do that, especially in agriculture, I feel like, because we are very community-ish. But find those people, go to coffee with them, go to dinner with them, just, find time to chat. And you're going to be busy. That's why you're on this time management webinar, because you're already so busy. But put those holds like on your calendar to just make the time to talk to them. And you don't even have to use the term like, I want you to be a mentor to me. You don't have to do that. You just, hey, I just like to sit down and chat with you about your story. And maybe you check in with them 2 or 3 times, maybe, but that's where you're going to get those little short sayings that Elizabeth is talking about, and hearing from them and absorbing the path that they took is going to give you that, it's going to help you to have experiences to recall back on whenever you're in situations that you need to make some of those prioritization decisions, because you can say, hey, this person who I respect, they told me about a time when they were in a scenario like this, and this is what they did. And when you find yourself in a situation, you're going to be able, where you have to make some of those type of prioritizations and, decision making, and whether or not that could be in undergrad, graduate school, or in your early career. Some of those people are going to be the people that you're going to want to call and talk through that problem or go to coffee with, right? So I think that's a tip that I would give you for the question that Tina asked.
Thank you. So I wanted to shift a little bit and talk about things that are out of our control. And so obviously life is crazy out there. The world is literally on fire. And so with the abundance of the distractions that are in today's world, how can individuals maintain focus and minimize interruptions while they're working or studying? And I'll turn it to Ashley first.
Ooh. Okay. Yeah, you got to find your spot. You got to know where that's at, where you can like get into the zone and do your work. And just, you got to create the time in your calendar to get there. And if that place for you is at 2:00 in the morning on your computer, then, that's, like in some kind of cubby, then that's okay. I mean, I want to go back to the earlier comment about you need to make sure you're taking care of yourself, right? But my real life example of this right now is I worked from a home office for 14 years. And so this was before that was even a thing, right? I am the original work from home person. I actually wrote an article about it way back in 2010 or something, before it was even a thing. And
A real trendsetter.
a real trendsetter, right? I know. And I've got a great story that I will not hang us up about how I wasn't offered a job because I wanted it to be a work from home. And a pretty high up individual in the organization said, no, we would never do that. And then COVID hit and haha, like everybody started working from home. But anyway, so I focused really well working from home. It was not, a lot of people, those were the conversations in the early days before this was a thing. People would say how, so anyway, I now work in an office with another person and an admin. And I've been doing that for 2.5 years, and it's a real struggle for me to focus. So yesterday, I didn't even go into the office because I was behind on emails. And I just said, you know what? I got to call a day where I stay. I have an office. I still have a home office set up at my house. And so that's what I did is I just stayed home and I churned through emails and I cleaned out 100 emails, and I felt so much better as a person by the end of the day. So, that's like to the question of being able to adapt your schedule, and like flexibility is, and you're not always going to have the authority to do that, but if that is something that you think is important to you, those are questions that you need to be asking in an interview. You need to be looking for companies that are going to be able to suit you for that. You need to be, that's why you need to always treat an interview like you're interviewing the company just as much as they are interviewing you, because you need to know what that work environment is going to look like. And this goes back to the answer to the last question about knowing yourself and knowing what you're looking for. So that's my answer for that question. I'm sure Elizabeth is going to wow us with some knowledge here too.
Elizabeth, anything to add?
I don't think I'm going to wow anyone. I've got some pretty basic things. I think Ashley's a great example of finding the spot. She's got a great home office setup. So all this to say, I'm going to be really plain. I'm just going to give you some bullet points here. Plan breaks. Plan whether it's like a 5-minute walk, but plan time for you to not be productive. That is the best time. And use your vacation days, y'all. Like plan time for you to take breaks, whether that's 15 minutes, and absolutely take a lunch break. That will help you be more focused in the long run, although that sounds backwards. Secondly, I would say plan focus time. I am a person that on my calendar, I have holds for things that I actually do. I call it one strategy day a month, where no meetings are on my calendars, which is pretty abnormal for me. I'm usually on a lot of meetings. No meetings for me, and I focus that on the big picture things that I know that I need to devote attention to. If I don't do that, it does not get done. So plan focus time and stick to it. And I would say something I learned from a mentor of mine is that your brain is actually best at memorization and productivity the first few hours you're awake. So if you need to prioritize something or schedule time to study for a test, your brain is operating best. And even if you think you're a night owl, I do too, your brain is actually best when it comes to memorization and working on tasks early in the morning within, again, the first 2 or 3 hours you wake up. So maximize your brain power and use that time as your focus time. I also am a big believer in silencing notifications. I do not have notifications for anything on my computer. I have very minimal notifications on my phone, and I do not let my electronic watch have any sort of connection to my like text messages or phone calls or that sort of thing. That's a personal preference for me, but because I know that I want to prioritize being present, and whether it's the work that I'm doing or the conversation I'm having, that's a personal preference. And then I'm going to do something a little bit different with my last piece here. Be choosy about what meetings you attend. You need to protect your time, and you need to think about what are the meetings in which I'm actually going to contribute something. What are the meetings I'm actually going to learn about something that I need to learn about? Or what are the meetings in which I need to support something? Outside of that, do you really need to attend the meeting? Maybe not. And something that a former employer of Ashley and they emphasize is don't accept a meeting if there's not an agenda in the meeting. And that is probably one of the most respectful things. Like, although it feels harsh to say no, like, hey, you could even decline and say, I don't understand the purpose for the meeting, or ask what it is, right? But your time is your time. And if you have something urgent that comes up, you are the manager of your schedule. And if you don't feel like there's a reason for the meeting, or there's no agenda for it, or you don't feel like you can contribute anything to it or learn from it or support it, opt out and do it respectfully, of course. But know that that's an option. That's what it comes down to. That's setting boundaries.
You've got to own your calendar. So that's something that, I mean, this is kind of speaking a little bit more to the early professional side of things. And that's something I've seen with the career shift that I've taken into what I do now with my last 2 interns. I came from 2 places where it was very common for other people in the organization to be able to access your calendar. I'm now in a working environment where I was teaching my admin. She had never worked anywhere. She had not been exposed to that world. And my last 2 interns had not had previous experiences of shared calendars. And so I'm bringing this up because there may be some people on this call who that will be a new concept to you when you go into the working world, that other people, depending upon the business you go into, can put things on your calendar, or you can put things on their calendar. And so I think it's very commonplace in a lot of larger organizations, like the ones where Elizabeth and I worked together, and it was in the one that I worked in prior, for people to do that. And so, but you own it. And so I just have the habit of blocking time on my calendar now, even though technically only in the summer when I have an intern is anybody else really looking at my calendar, but I still am in the habit of doing that. And it helps me to have that focus time, because like I will put a block and say, this is when I'm working on this, or, this is owned by this project. And I mentioned earlier that I'm in a leadership program currently around boundaries. And most of the people in that program are mid-level executives such as myself. And we had a whole session on being able to say to people, that's not going to work for me. Like that. I mean, that's so just know that this is it is an evolving process as part of being a professional, is able to say to people, to say no, to be able to say that's not going to work for me, to own your time, own your calendar, and make those prioritizations. So buckle up now, because it's not an easy fix.
Thank you. We're getting so many good tips. So I'm hearing a lot of like knowing yourself, prioritizing things that align with the goals that you have, knowing how to say no, setting those boundaries to protect your time and your peace. I have one follow-up question, and then we'll open it up for Q&A with the audience. But can you share a little bit more about delegating tasks? So this might be more for senior level students or mid-level career professionals, whoever's in charge of managing maybe colleagues or other people. So delegating tasks can obviously save a lot of time. So how can individuals effectively delegate or outsource certain responsibilities that they have to maximize their productivity? And can you provide any examples of tasks that would be suitable for people to delegate? Let's start with or Ashley.
Well, I'll go really quick. I don't have this in front of me, but one of the best resources that I went through along my professional journey to being able to for delegation is a really, really thin book. I mean, it's about this thin, and it's called if you want it done right, you don't have to do it yourself. I 100% came from the world, just, Elizabeth. So Elizabeth, I'm from North Carolina, she's from Maryland, but we both have dairy backgrounds. So maybe it's in the milk. I don't know. But I 100% grew up. If you want it done right, you got to do it yourself, and you got to work really hard. But it's a great little book, and it has a bookmark at the end of the book that you can tear out. And it has 6 steps to effectively delegating tasks to other people. And those 6 steps are just really quickly, you got to prepare beforehand. So you have to be thinking ahead of that task and be ready, like planning for what you're going to delegate. You have to clearly define it, be specific with that person. You have to clearly outline what you want them like to accomplish, the time frame. You want to define the level of authority. And this is why I mentioned that earlier in one of the answers, that they have in that task. And so do they have the authority as they're working on it to come back to you and recommend things, or do they have the authority to inform and initiate? So like if they get to a point, and I've used this since I've came into the role that I'm in with the peanut growers. I use those two steps almost on a daily basis, working with my support staff to say, on this particular task, you have the authority to do this. And so you have the authority to go ahead and initiate something, or the authority to act. You don't have to come back to me on whatever this is I'm giving you to do. The fifth step is to identify checkpoints, when you're going to come back around and check on where you are in the progress. And then the sixth one is just having a debriefing session to discuss what went well, what could have been improved, because that's the only way that you're going to help that person grow to the point that you don't have to delegate to them anymore. They have grown in management or whatever the next step is. And so that's I keep it on my desk now. I try to like train myself to think like that on everything from the smallest task of mailing something to a larger task like putting together our financials to give to our accountant to run our review for the end of the year. I mean, it is just it's a really great little checklist. So I think that can come into play whether you're working on a group assignment in college, those steps. And if you Google these, I mean, I think it's out there on the internet somewhere. If you don't want it done right, you don't have to do it yourself. 6 steps to the professional world. You can use it there. So Elizabeth.
Yeah, everybody just get a copy of that book. Ashley might not be getting commission on that, but she should be, right? Based on that. So I'll just be totally honest and vulnerable with you all. I'm on this journey now. I've been an individual contributor in my job. I've been in the working world for about 6 years. And so delegation is hard and newer to me. So I'll just kind of talk you through my thought process. And Ashley said it perfectly. It starts with me letting go of control. My managers at every job that I've had, including Ashley at some point, has told me, let go of control, Elizabeth. And it's because I just care about things being done well. And so one thing that I've been learning a lot and working through myself is, what is good enough look like? Is it 85% complete? Is it just done, no matter what capacity it's in? So that's one thing that I don't necessarily have the answers to, but I do think that thinking through what does good enough look like. And that's a phrase that I got from a book called The Good Enough Job by Simon Stoltzoff. I would really recommend that book when you think about work-life balance, but that's been something that's been helpful to me of like, okay, what is good enough done? Maybe it doesn't look exactly perfectly like I want it to, but it's accomplished by the deadline and it still gets the ROI in some capacity like I want it to. So that's one thing I ask myself. The other thing that I've been asking myself recently is what is simple processes that someone very easily could just pick up, and it's repetitive, but it doesn't need to fill my time, because my time maybe should be spent more so on strategy than it would be in executing some small things. So I really think I would encourage you, if you're new to this like me, I've been working a lot with my manager on this. I'm revisiting my job description and what my priorities are of my position. And it's actually a lot more strategic than what I think I've been doing for the last year since I've been in this role. I do everything from shipping things in FedEx to printing things at Staples, and getting logistics ready for career fairs and our internships. And a lot of that stuff has a lot of tiny logistics that I could very easily give to someone because they know how to talk to a caterer, or they know how to work with a hotel, right? Those are things that people can take care of that they're better at than me. And just because I want it done a certain way doesn't mean I can't let other people help me. And another thing that I think Ashley's been a big part of my professional career and in my life. And one thing that I think I learned from her and others is that you need to think about what would be useful to teach others. Maybe they're not actually going to contribute something as you are delegating in a huge wildly impressive way, but maybe you just bringing them into the conversation and showing them your processes and your thought process and the way that you do things could be really helpful, because when you think about succession planning, people aren't in jobs very often or super long anymore. So if you can share accountability with someone and share somebody else's brain a little bit on those things that maybe are stored in your head, can be really helpful. So, I mean, again, I'm working through this right now. I'm trying to figure out, how do I empower other teammates to go to different events like manners clusters and career fairs rather than just me as a one-person team. How do I delegate those things? And it's very much a way for me to think through what does strategy look like? How can I prioritize strategy, and what can I let go of control on? So I'm just being honest, I'm not an expert in that realm, but I think Ashley's resources are probably a really good start for everybody.
Thank you. And yeah, and the chat, Ashley has dropped the link to that book in the chat. And we will be sending out a post-session recap email with all the links and all the different tools and habit trackers and things like that with our email. So please take a look in that email. Any questions for our panelists? I guess they did everything. They talked about everything that you all needed to manage your time.
Can I give a unsolicited book recommendation on boundaries? Because we talked a little bit about boundaries, but I am very much a person that struggles with that, and I'm all about just giving resources where it can be. And I'm not going to pronounce this author's name correctly, but it's both a book and it has a workbook to go with it, and it's been one of the most comprehensive but also tangible pieces of literature I've understood boundaries on and how to integrate them into my life. And it's called Set Boundaries, Find Peace by Nedra Tawwab. Nedra is also on Instagram, and people may have seen some comment or content from her. She's pretty active and has like over millions of followers. But sharing that with you of Set Boundaries, Find Peace is such an awesome book if you're trying to understand the ways to protect your time, to build a life towards the person that you want to be in both personal life, professional life, and everything in between. That's been really, really helpful. And another book that has helped me a lot with managing time has been Take Back Your Time by Christy Wright. And that one is focused on building your ideal week. And although that it feels impossible to build your ideal week because we all have responsibilities at work and personal life and everything, there is a way that you can try to build an ideal time or schedule for you for a certain time of your life. So I can put both of those names in the chat, but I just wanted to share that although I'm not an expert on managing my time, those have been really helpful.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thanks, Renee.
Any final questions?
I'm going to give a final thought that I try to, when I find myself in the whirlwind, I remind myself that there is a difference in being busy and being productive. And if I am wrapped up being busy, then I am not working towards, I'm not doing my job, because my job is to not be busy. My job is to be productive on behalf of the growers I represent and the association. And so that's accomplishing the goals that I have set. And so that's a grounding thing that I kind of try to center myself in. And so when I look at my to-do list to go to delegation, which I don't know that either one of us really said anything about to-do list that much. But I do live and die by a to-do list, just like I live and die by a calendar. And I think you should own both. My office mate doesn't believe in a to-do list, and I burn him on that regularly because I think he misses things. But when I look at it, I say, am I being busy or am I being productive?
And I've got a couple questions here in the chat too that we can kind of answer with the little bit of time we have left. One from someone who's an undergrad who wants to get all the experience they can without getting stressed or overwhelmed. So kind of managing the balance between gaining experience, but also not doing too much. Do you have any recommendations? It was talked about a bit, but maybe some wrap up thoughts on that specifically.
I'm going to compare it to a resume really quickly. So I was at a career fair last year and I got a resume from an undergrad student that was 4 pages long. Now, if you are not familiar with resumes for undergrads, they really should be 1 page. And this student decided to tell us everything that they had ever done. And for me, that did not show that that student made an impact anywhere that they went because they did all of the different things. Now, when it comes to being an undergrad, I would encourage you to dabble in, I would say, honestly, no more than 3 things. You're transitioning into school and trying to get a handle on things. It's great to see what's out there, but then figure out who are your people who are like-minded or who motivate you to be better. And or is this giving to you, like filling your cup? I'll call that life giving. Or is that something that you are giving to, right? Gaining from? Like, is it a matter of, are you developing from that experience? And so put those filters on it. And again, I would challenge you to have that 1-page resume where you can quantify the impact that you had, whether it was through a volunteer experience or an extracurricular or whatever it might be, rather than the 4-page resume. So know that there is tremendous value in getting exposure to lots of different things. And it's awesome to be curious about stuff, but do not feel obligated to get all of the experience in the world. Most people, myself included, aren't looking for people with tremendous levels of experience as a college student. I'm looking for people who are curious, they're willing to learn, they're organized, and they can work independently. Those are more important to me than you having all the experience in the world.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I see one question that just popped up in the chat. So I'm going to ask this one to Ashley and then we'll wrap it up. So the question is, what tools or techniques do you use to track your time, assuming that you are getting out of track during the day?
I've heard of apps that have I've heard of apps that have like timers and stuff. I myself have not used any of those. I think for me, it really just kind of comes back to the calendar and blocking time on my calendar, because I do kind of live and die by that so much. For scheduling appointments, and that's just to the career that I have and how my day, the demands that I have on my day and where I'm at in my life, right? But I know that there are some that are out there. And then I would even say little things like when I'm in my office, I am fortunate enough that I have an office, like shutting my door or having a playlist that I know is X amount of time long. So if you're somebody who likes to have music while you're doing something, and I'll say to myself, I can only do this for this length of this playlist, like while this is running, that's while I will work on this project. Or if I'm taking a break, I will take that break while I listen to this podcast, that just being accountable to myself in that way, using those kind of tools. So Elizabeth may know of a particular something or another, but that's what I would say.
No, I just use my calendar religiously. That's all.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is figuring out what works best for you. And again, that goes back to our speaker's comment about just figuring out your own personal goals and knowing yourself. So with that, I want to thank both of our speakers, Ms. Ashley, Ms. Elizabeth. Thank you both so much for all of these practical tips and advice that you've given today. I'm going to now turn it over to Dr. Staley to wrap it up.
Thank you so much. And I just want to thank our speakers today for this very informative webinar. I've learned so much. This was amazing. Thank you. And we also want to thank our attendees for coming and joining us again for this webinar. If you have any questions that were not answered during the webinar, please feel free to reach out to us and we'll get those answered. And also, please make sure to complete our survey. The QR code is on the screen. Please complete that. We're always working to improve our webinars. We want to make these valuable resources for you. So please take the time to fill out that survey and please register for our next webinar on burnout. With that, I hope everyone has a wonderful evening, and we will see you next month for our next webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank
All right.
you
Thank
so
you.
much to Elizabeth and Ashley as well. Thank you.
You got it.